Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about the difference between training just for a goal or to actually train with purpose. This is something personally that I've experienced both as a coach and a runner that takes a lot of practice, takes perspective, and is something that I continue to struggle with to this day. It's easy to get too wrapped up in a goal, too wrapped up in a result, and to lose sight of our purpose of why we're running, why we're training, and what it means to us, which is different for all of us. So kind of just to go into that, a goal is something that's usually like finite, it's specific, it's like a counting measure, and in our society, that's something that we usually put a lot of emphasis on. And with running in particular, it's very easy to set time goals, things like that. So it lends itself to that, and therefore we often can lose sight of our purpose. Whereas purpose is kind of you can have a goal and that's sort of a stepping stone to your purpose. But if you lose sight of the purpose, which is usually the bigger picture, kind of your driving motivator, and often acts as a renewable kind of source of energy to motivate you to train, even when it's hard or even when you don't have a goal on the schedule, something like training through the summer, or maybe you've just come off a big race. If you have that purpose and that why of why you run and why you train, you're going to have a better relationship, in my experience, from as a coach and runner, that makes a lifelong healthy relationship with running. So kind of to go into that, I'd like to talk about two examples, because chances are you've been on both ends of this, where there's times where you've had a purpose, but times where your goal becomes too consuming. So we're going to cover two runners just so we can kind of get an understanding of what this looks like. I know this helps me personally to think about it in more tangible ways. So we've got Greg, we're going to call Greg, who's goal-oriented, and his focus is on qualifying for the Boston Marathon, running under 3 hours. We've got Peter, same goal, but Peter is also looking to train more with purpose. And so his same goal is to run under 3 hours in the Boston Marathon. So let's start with Greg. Let's say his goal is to train and qualify for the Boston Marathon. Often when you're just focused on the goal, it happens so that you're kind of just doing it because maybe other people will think, oh wow, if I qualify for Boston, people will think I'm fast. Or maybe you post it to social media, you're like, this is my goal and this is going to motivate me to train because I put it out there. You're not really running, you're not really that excited about running, or maybe you're lacking that motivation, and so you put this big scary goal on the calendar and you think that'll give me what I need to train, and often that isn't the best way. Or maybe you're just looking to beat other runners. You're like, oh, I know this person that qualified for the Boston Marathon, I can do that. And you're just focused in on that goal, and that's your driving force, and that's what's driving Greg. Whereas Peter, who's kind of looking more, I set this same goal, but I want to find my purpose through this, is maybe Peter wants to experience the Boston Marathon. It's not just about qualifying, it's not just about that recognition, it's about actually going and running Boston. It's maybe about becoming a stronger runner and developing strength training, core exercises, mobility, just kind of like a bigger picture, long-term approach. Maybe healthier habits in eating, or making more running friends. And so this goal is sort of a means to an end of a bigger picture and healthier relationship of building that love for running. So let's jump into kind of what Greg's training, who's just focused on the goal, might look like. Often in my experience, when training just with a goal as your driving motivator, it can be kind of hard to get excited about training. It's often fear that motivates you to train because you're afraid of failure, and you don't only associate that failure with failing in the race, but you sort of start to feel like you might be a failure if you don't accomplish this goal. You put it out there, you said you were going to do it, and that often drives you to train. So you feel like you have to train instead of like that you get to and you're getting to experience it. Often when you're training just based on a goal too is when things get hard, when you're tired or you're sore, or especially when you have an injury, it's a lot easier to give up because it's just that goal. You're not looking at the bigger picture, and it's easy to get negative. So that's why I really feel it's important instead to have that purpose. It helps us avoid getting burnt out and feeling tired. So let's look at Peter's training. Peter, who has this same goal, but has kind of that bigger picture, that purpose behind it, is excited to run more miles. It doesn't mean they won't be hard, it doesn't mean they won't be challenged, but it's really looking forward to that, getting to run more miles, getting to put in more big long runs, embraces the sacrifices that come along with that instead of feeling like they're limiting in his life. They feel like they're enriching it. Also, just gets up when it's cold, or it's really hot, or maybe you're tired again, because you feel like your purpose is that running brings you discipline. It helps you. You're focused on that daily practice as opposed to the end result. It'll all be worth it when I reach that goal, because that's often not the case. So kind of just focuses on the process and not so much on the result. And often when you're trained that way too, you're also more forgiving to yourself and you're less negative. So let's go through, they both train that way, let's say. Often as the race is coming up, what I see is when you've trained with purpose is you're really excited about the race. And while you may still be nervous and you may still be, a little afraid of, am I going to reach my goal or not? Or maybe, that's normal still, I think, to deal with. But there's always another race. You're excited to continue to train. You've built your running practice. You have your purpose. And this is just one step along the way and one experience along the way. Whereas Greg, who trained for the goal, only the goal, you're just focused on that and not beyond. You can't wait for the race to be here so you can just get done with this, move on from this because it's been so draining and so taxing. So that's kind of usually where you'll be at if you're too focused on the goal and not as much on the bigger picture. Now let's pretend, we're coming up on the race, and Peter, who trained with purpose, gets sick, or maybe the weather's really terrible. These are things that are often out of our control. And when you're only focused on the goal, if that happens, that can be absolutely devastating, because maybe you did do everything you can, but there are things that are out of your hand, out of your control. You can't control the weather. That really affects his race. So let's say Peter runs 3:02, misses qualifying for the Boston Marathon, and right there we'd rate that as a failure if you just looked at it purely results oriented. But Peter says, wow, I ran a 15-minute PR, it was 80 degrees, I was sick, and my purpose is so strong, I'm loving running, I'm going to keep running. And Peter goes on and runs 10 more Boston Marathons, has a lifelong healthy relationship with running and continues to build on that purpose. Whereas Greg, let's say Greg gets a super fast course, gets perfect weather, and he runs his race, runs 2:57, qualifies for the Boston Marathon. Right there on a results-oriented basis, we'd say, wow, Greg, he's a success, he did it. But often what you'll see there is, maybe Greg doesn't even want to run the Boston Marathon because he's so burnt out, he doesn't feel like he has a purpose, he doesn't even know why he's doing this and why he's running, and never runs the Boston Marathon, never experiences that, and leaves the sport. So it's not the result that, in my book, defines success. It's more about that relationship that you have with running and that purpose that you find in it. And what I want to say to you is, maybe your thinking is, wow, I feel like I'm Greg, and what I'd say to that is we all are at times. We all are, get too wrapped up in the goal, too wrapped up in the pass fail of what a race is. And we often like to minimize or forget about the fact that so much is out of our control. So when you attach yourself only to that goal, that's the success. You're setting yourself up for failure. You're going to fail at times. If not, you're just setting really, really easy goals, which isn't a good thing to do. But what you are doing is you're attaching your self-worth and your, success purely on something that is often really a lot more out of our control than we even realize. So instead, have goals, but let them be kind of a guiding point of what, where your focus is, but really focus daily in on your purpose. Find that. And like I said, you're going to have to keep coming back to this, at least in my experience. This isn't something that you figure out and you master and then you can just forget about, because if not, what you'll notice is you'll wake up and one day you're too focused on the goal. And that doesn't mean, that it can't be part of your focus, but make sure you have your why behind that. And another thing I'd say is, if this is something that you're struggling with, I think it's helpful to read books on this, to understand it deeper. And The Passion Paradox is something I read recently that's really, really good. We'll include a link to that. I'd recommend checking out. It's an easy read and really helps with this type of stuff. Or we have Amanda, the sports psychologist here in town, or you probably have a resource closer to you are if you're not in Gainesville. So you'll find her information below as well. Recommend checking those out, and let's continue to find our purpose and train with purpose and keep it rolling.